Well, Ben, thank you so much for helping my project.
Hi, project.
Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Ben Strothmann. I'm Steven's friend from New York City. And let's see, I'm a drag queen known as Honey LeBronx, the vegan drag queen, very Googleable. I'm also a photographer, a playwright, an actor, an aspiring chef, and now a new up-and-coming woodworker and furniture designer and builder.
Oh, that's funny.
I have a lot of passions, and then I just go down the rabbit hole, and I can't stop until I'm like fully immersed. So yeah, so I bought a wood thickness planer for my one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan, and everyone's like, "You're crazy." I'm like, "Well, I know, but I'm crazy, and I have a wood and a planer now."
So are you building like tables, chairs, bookshelves?
Yes.
Like what are you?
Yes,
focus all of that.
You know how you need something, and you go out looking for it, and you find almost what you need, but you're like, this is nice, but it has a thing on the side, and I don't need that thing on the side. I just want one with these, not that. Or I need it, but I need one that opens this way, not that. No one ever really makes exactly what maybe it's good for everyone else, but for my needs, I'm always like, I need it this way, but a little less this shape, a little. And so I've always just kind of thought, God, I wish I could just make it myself. Mm-hmm. And so I work from home lately. And so I wanted to stand more. I don't have enough surfaces, so I'm like, what if I built? And I started sketching it in SketchUp. And I came up with this, like, it's like a piece of wood against the window and a folding lid, and then it's two wings that fold inside, so they support it. Okay. And it hooks onto two clips that I taped to my window with that super strong adhesive. So now I have a standing folding desk that's portable. Like, I could have brought it with me if I wanted. So I love just making my own solutions for things, and then I've always got them.
Yeah, just before we started filming this, I put the little, what is it?
Footstool,
ottoman, as like a place for you to keep your cup. But it's always a problem. We have like all these chairs, but then we don't like have places where people will put stuff.
Yeah.
I would like to have like, something that comes
up.
I'm
holding like my mug because then it helps me think I'm hiding my tummy.
But it's just, in terms of having something that you want, being able to like have a space like this where suddenly you can seat 20 people and then like the next moment, it's like you still have open space, That's being able to have furniture.
You hit the head on the nail.
Yeah.
I'm designing a workbench, but now my entire apartment is wall-to-wall container store, alpha shelving system.
Okay.
So I have this like 16 inch deep shelves from one wall to the next on one half of my living room. Mm-hmm. And I have a hospital style sliding curtain track that I had to like drill into the concrete ceiling. My building staff loves me, but so the whole thing hides behind a curtain, and I want a workbench. But I'm like, I want a workbench, but I need, as a photographer, I need my living room to be an empty void. When I have a 12-foot wide seamless paper green screen backdrop, if I want to start green screening stuff, like doing the news or the weather one day, and so the workbench I want to design, it needs to be able to fit behind that curtain. So I'm making an 18-inch deep, a 1.5 foot deep workbench, and everyone's like, workbenches are not, that's too shallow, but I'm designing a lid so it flips open,
right? And
the legs, so the legs sort of fit together, kind of like two U shapes. Mm-hmm. So you can pull the legs apart, open the top, and then on the underneath side, I started thinking, what if I build like a cutout notch in the underside of the desk, and then I have different face plates that I can drop in there, so I can have like my table saw attached from underneath. And I let myself just kind of like stew on the idea until I start realizing, oh, well, this might not be able to bear as much weight. Maybe I should adjust this. And then I'll start showing it to other woodworkers. And it's very validating when I showed it to woodworker friends, and they're like, this is actually very smartly designed. And I'm like, thank you. So, it's an obvious means I have to just keep going. So I have a friend who hired me to design some shelves for her. And now, for her and her roommate, who are both very short, they got these bar stools for their kitchen table, but their legs hang off of them. Okay. So with the leftover wood from making her shelves, I was like, I'm going to make you And I literally want to make a soapbox for both of them.
Sure.
And so I want to get a stencil and use a wood burner to like burn in like soap, 5 cents, and finish it and sand it down. So I'm going to make them a little box that their feet rest on when they're sitting, but I need it to look like a soapbox with handles. I just think that's the cutest detail.
I think, I know, magical furniture that appears when you need it
Yeah.
and disappears when you don't.
Well, especially in Manhattan where space is at a premium, every cubic inch has to earn its keep. If I'm going to put something in that corner, it's like, okay, it's auditioning for me. It's like, what do you do? I do this and this. Well, we're looking for someone who can do this, and it can turn into an ironing board.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, spacecraft design.
PB's Playhouse is basically my idea for home interiors.
But I mean, you're in this cramped quarters, up in space for 6 months at a time, a year at a time, 2 months at a time.
Yeah.
And you need that space to be your bedroom, your living room, your work room, everything. I mean, it's just like...
So they should send New Yorkers to space because we're already ready for it.
Like the tiny houses. It's kind of funny. It's like a New York apartment in the wilderness is a tiny house.
New York apartment in the wilderness. I would be the first to make that. That would be awesome. Yeah.
So let's see. So you're an actor.
Yeah.
What got you into that?
When I was in middle school, so 6th grade, 11 years old, I don't know. I don't remember hearing an announcement that there are going to be auditions for the school musical 42nd Street, which is a very ambitious show to do for middle schoolers. It's a big all tap dancing musical. I just remember being taught the audition song that they were going to have each of us sing one at a time on stage. I just remember like, okay, it's my turn to walk out on stage and sing in front of an audience full of people. And it was terrifying, and I probably did horribly. But I got cast in the show, and just nothing was so romantic as just rehearsing a musical. And there's like the leading lady our leading lady, Beth Dwyer, she was a 7th grader. I wrote her fan mail, and I'm like, you're just so cool, and like, what's it like having the lead role? And so like, it was like, I just remember the first day of the show, I remember the curtain starts to open, and here I am on stage, and the audience starts clapping, and I just started, I started laughing, because I was like, oh my God, I'm at a show, and I'm in it, I'm the guy on stage, and like, it was just such a weird thing to me, so it was just one of those things that you don't know you love until you try it, and then you realize you love it. Later, maybe how many years later, like half a decade later, I started to get into photography, and I loved portraiture. And I rolled my own film. I made my own dark room. I would develop my own pictures. I turned the basement into a portrait studio. Like, I was running a business out of my parents' basement when I was like 17, 16. And the magic of, I know I took this person's picture. I know it's on this roll of film in this dark canister, but it's a latent image. It's never seen light, except for that flash of a second. It's all.
Right.
And then I would go into my dark room. I would roll the film onto a reel. I would develop it, and taking the lid off and pulling out the reel and rolling out the plastic, and I'm looking at this clear plastic with an inverted face, and I'm just like, I put someone's face in this plastic, and then that turns into a picture. It's the first time I found something that gave me a similar kind of thrill that I got from performing. And so over time, I found other passions, like cooking and serving your food to people and them enjoying it was another thing where I'm like, oh, this is exciting. And now just like furniture, like delivering a piece of furniture to someone, and it's in their home, and you see pictures of it, and you see them using it. It's just, I don't think I will ever run out of things to discover, and discovering myself in terms of who I am, because I now know me as a woodworker. If any woodworkers are watching this, I do not have the audacity to call myself a woodworker yet, but like I'm now starting down that path. And actually, even this ottoman, when you brought the ottoman over, my first thing was, when I was looking at it, when I want to unwind, I watch videos where people are like restoring old furniture. So I now know this little, you know how there's always that little thing here. I'm like, this is a piece of waxed rope.
Okay.
That they then put here into a seam to give it this sort of structure. I would, now that I look at these kind of things, I look at them. When I was a kid, I would look at stuff like this just with like, it just fell to earth as it was. But now I'm like, oh, I can make that. Like the idea that all of the things that we see around us, they all represent skill and mastery and work. And someone made these things. It's just making stuff. It just feels like wizardry to me.
Whenever you look at this ottoman, as well as all the other furniture around here and everything, does your mind like mentally decompose it and think through all the processes and like the raw materials? Like...
It does now. It probably wouldn't have. Even I was sitting in that rocking chair, and it's not just back and forth rocking, but it's got the two gliders. So and I was looking at it, and I was trying to think, note to self, how was this made? And then the next thought I had was, I don't need to look too closely at how it was made, because I can just think physics, and I can just kind of figure out how would I make it to do this. And I actually like doing things that way more, because I showed this I showed a design of a workbench to other woodworkers on Reddit, and a lot of them are like, I wouldn't have thought to do it that way. And I love hearing that, because I love that if you study it, well, then you know how to do it the right way. But if you don't, you can kind of find your own way. And I'm sure I'd save myself a lot of trouble and time and heartache if I learn how to do things the right way. But I love reinventing the wheel. I love reinventing the wheel. I'm also fascinated by who invented the wheel. And like, they must have never shut up about it. That would have probably been like, hey, guess what I made? Anyway.
They kept going around and around and around. Sorry.
You should be.
But no, I totally get your point too. I feel the same way, that I'd rather sort of see the problem anew and try to solve it from, first experiences, as opposed to learning to monkey what's already been done. And in a way, you're sort of losing out on all this knowledge and everything. But on the other hand, you're also opening up the potential of learning something new that hasn't been developed yet, just by looking at it as a new project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of examples where I've done. Oh, yes. I'm a spreadsheet nerd. People who are passionate about spreadsheets would think I'm a nerd for liking spreadsheets too much. And there was this, I forget exactly what it was. Actually, no, I don't forget what it was. Copying rich text into a spreadsheet, it will paste it as rich text, but you cannot then extract the link from the rich text. So you can click on the link, but you can't ask the next cell, hey, what was the link in the rich? It's like, I don't know, it's this rich text. And I'm like, no, my computer can point me there. It has to have a way of knowing what it was. And I started digging around on Stack Overflow and Reddit, and much more experienced people than me were like, everyone wants to know how to do that. We've all tried. There isn't a way to do it. I forget what I did, but I went to bed that night having done it. And I always say, if you tell me that something is impossible, you've just paved the way for me. Like, all I need is someone to say I can't do it, and it's halfway done. That's the first part. So I'm just so motivated by, like, I don't want to say nothing's impossible, because I probably couldn't jump off the roof and fly unassisted by some contraption anyway. But anytime we think something's impossible, I hear a lack of creativity. And I just think, how do we know yet? All the things that we would have thought were impossible. I mean, just today, Barat was talking to his wife on the phone by video, and she was basically in the room with all... They would have burned you at the stake as a witch 100 years ago. They're like, what kind of sorcery is this? And things that we couldn't have conceived of now are just like, oh yeah, that's just normal.
It is amazing. Yeah, no, absolutely. But coming back to, and you as an actor, I've only seen a few plays in Broadway or in New York,
Yeah.
and one of them was the Lehman Brothers trilogy. I didn't know if you had a chance to see that.
I didn't. I wish I did.
It was amazing. 3 actors that really somehow recreated like dozens and dozens of people. And, just really well done, I thought. But.
Yeah, I wish I saw it. All I know about the Lehman Brothers is one of the guys that worked in that building was in the gym in that building and like saw one of them on a treadmill one day and just punched him in the face. And it just makes me so happy to hear that happened.
Really?
I'm a very non-violent person. I don't like violence, but I'm like, good. I'm glad he just got that one in. Spoke his mind.
Well, it's kind of interesting though, because like the one that was started by the actual Lehman Brothers kind of morphed into like this investment firm that was really something quite different than what it started out with.
Yeah.
I thought I learned a lot. I
wish
feel
I
like I
did.
learned a lot from Lehman Brothers. I learned what they taught me.
And then they did a play based on Enron, I think.
Oh, did they? Okay.
It wasn't a musical, was it?
Like
Well, at any rate, yeah.
Crookedy or something.
Something, yeah. There was a lot of, around that time, there was a lot of plays about what happened. What a time to be alive.
It is. So what got you interested in spreadsheets? Do you remember your very first spreadsheet?
So my parents run a cheesecake company. I don't remember my first spreadsheet, but I remember my first database.
Okay.
My dad gave me a copy of file. My dad would sit me down in front of computers since I was like 5 years old, and he taught me like my first line of basic code. And it was just like 10, print, hello, run, hello. And I'm like, you just made the screen say hello.
I know, it's
What
so
else
awesome.
can we do? And so then he started teaching me more and more code. So in first grade, I was just making computer games. Eventually I was making computer games. I also have ADHD, so I always finish 80% of something and then I move on to something else.
Sure.
So I didn't finish a lot of computer games. I started a lot. Or at least I tried. It was nice to start trying to make them. So he would always put things in front of me. He gave me a simulated brain surgery video game when I was in middle school. So I do know how to diagnose and operate for a cerebral aneurysm. I know how to operate for a subdural hematoma. I didn't figure out tumors yet. They never survived that one. But it was just fascinating to have that knowledge. And then in high school, he got me a copy of FileMaker Pro. Now, my dad would make his own software, essentially, out of FileMaker Pro databases for the company. So when you're at the screen, you click start a new order, shipping, whatever, inventory. He made a website that works the same way. You could place orders to it. And just seeing my dad just make his own website, make his own software that we're going to use at the store. And I was the lead in the high school musical Godspell, and we sort of had this competition going on, like who can sell the most tickets, the most ads in the program, the most angels in the program, and each of these had a point system. So it just naturally occurs to me, because that can't all just reside up here and then show up when I need it to show up. So I started making this thing to track that. So I could just look at this dashboard and I was like, okay, I've sold this many tickets. Wait, how many people are coming to the show on Saturday? Okay, I have 28 people coming on Saturday, 20 people coming on Friday. Oh, I've sold this many points. This means I'm this far in the ranking. And then I won like the prize to Six Flags or something and it was just so fascinating to me that data has a place. Every number, every stat has somewhere that data is power if it is organized and harnessed. And it's like steam has no power of induction. It has to be channeled to be power. So if you can, channel and direct data, there's so many things that you can use it for. So when I started as a drag queen in 2018, I started touring full time. I would do my drag show as a fundraiser for LGBTQ organizations and animal rights organizations. Why? Because I'm so generous. Well, because now I can go to any city. Doesn't matter if people know me or not. They don't know me. But I have two organizations who are in charge of getting people there, so we raise money. So it's a great model for doing so. So I did I did 111 shows in 73 cities in 5 countries, benefiting 148 organizations, and raised just over $44,000 for charity. I love statistics so much I became one. But that's a good one, right? But after my 5th show, I was like, wait a minute. I've not been writing this down. Okay, wait, how much money did we make at this show? Okay, how much money did we make at this show? Wait, how many people were in the audience at this show? Because if it's not too far in the past, or actually even some shows are fun, I can still kind of close my eyes and remember, okay, I was on stage, there was these 4 people sitting right here, these 2 off to the side, like 20 people were in that. So I was like, before I forget this data, let's record it somewhere. So, because I would like to be able to look back and say, like, yeah, I've had this many people, I performed for this many people, or this is my 1,000th person in the audience, or my 100th show, or we've now broken $10,000 at the. And over time, I started accumulating. It may seem compulsive to some, but it's a whole different video if I talked about my business model, but it's a volunteer-based model, so I always have 2 organizations in case one isn't quite pulling their weight. Also from 2 different causes, so we're pulling from 2 different communities, not 2 animal rights groups in Pittsburgh. They're pulling from the same people. So I need 2 volunteers from each group. 2 to work what I call the box office, 1 to be what I call the stage manager, and 1 to be the house manager. Stage manager, just make sure there's something I can set a Red Bull and a water and my purse on and my fan. And the stage manager, it's like, just all I need you to do is count how many people are in the audience, and also write down the time I started the show and the time I ended the show. I don't know why I needed that data, but now that I look back, when I'm getting my makeup on and someone's like, hey, how long do you think till showtime? I can say, well, on average, I'm 18 and a half minutes late starting each show. Okay. So the show's at 7:30, we'll probably start at about 7:48, 7:49. And I walk right out on stage, and I'm like, I'm late, but I'm exactly as late as it said I would be. They knew exactly what to expect. And I was hosting the National Animal Rights. I will use this as a prop. I was hosting the National Animal Rights. No, I was the closing night. I was doing something at the National Animal Rights Conference in DC. I was a closing night performer. And so here I am on stage, and I did what I called like an anniversary countdown. So I'm like, everyone in the room stand up. If you are newly vegan, like less than a month, sit down. And when they do, we all clap for them. If you've been vegan 6 months, sit down. We all clap for them. If you've been vegan a year, sit down. And then as we go on and on and on, there's like 8 people left. It's like, if you've been vegan more than 30 years, 31 years, 32 years, man! And it's so exciting. But I also said to the group, I was like, wouldn't it be great if we could know how long? So I had them put scrap paper at every table with a pen, and had every person write down how many years they've been vegan and how many months. I had someone else add all of those numbers, and then I thought, why did I do that? I should have had one person at the table add the numbers up and then bring them over. And then I thought, no, I should have had everyone just text the number to me. And I'm not giving my text number to 600 people at a show. And then it finally hit me, Google Forms. How many years have you been vegan? How many months? Or alternately, what date did you go vegan? And then if you want, what's your name, email, and zip code, so I can put you on my mailing list and let you know when I'm performing in your area, if you want. And this way, I made a spreadsheet, so at the end of my show, I'm like, wouldn't it be great if we all knew how long we've all been vegan? And I'm like, okay, go to the seat, fill this out, I'm gonna do a number real quick, and then when we're done, and I'm like, all right, this audience, there are 38 vegans among us. We have collectively been vegan for 617 years. That means we have spared 1,300 lives, and we have cleared, we have saved this many acres of forested land from being clear cut. Since none of us knows how much that is 4.7 football fields. Like, I just love that I can take this data and just make it like understandable instantly, like in real time. I even thought of doing a play once where somehow the play is interactive, where it's based on the audience's feedback. And at the beginning, the audience like, are you currently feeling depressed? Have you ever had a suicidal thought? Are you grieving something right now? And just being able to look at my audience and be like, 17% of us are grieving something right now. 8% of us almost didn't come to this today because something is on our mind. I just love data unites us. Data can, and I often joke, but I'm like, only spreadsheets can save us now. I used to joke that. Then I was in Iceland, and surprisingly, there was a refugee crisis. There was about 80 or 90 Palestinian refugees who had somehow gotten there from Greece. And they're being told, you can't be refugees, you already got refugee status. So they're like, do you see what's happening in the refugee camps in Greece? They're flooding, we're being burned down, the police are stealing stuff. And I just remember in Iceland, the immigration was acting independent of the government. They were deporting people even though the government was like, they can stay, let them stay. Immigration was like, no, we're deporting them anyway. And so I started thinking, like, how do we know who's safe? Like, do we know how many of us are there? So I made a spreadsheet that said Google Forms, pick your name from the drop-down list. I got a list of everyone's names. Pick your name from the drop-down list and hit submit. Just so we can see, like, oh, Amir hasn't submitted in over a week. Can someone check on him? And then I thought, well, why not add to it, are you currently in danger? If no, then submit. If yes, do you need someone to come to where you are right now? If yes, what's the location? Probably aren't going to have a phone, so how will we recognize you? Are you with someone who has a phone number, etc.? And then, like, what else do you need to tell us? And then I started adding COVID symptoms, like, are you having symptoms? Have you been vaccinated? Blah, blah, blah. And I was making this, and it was so robust, and they were using it. The problem is, I went back to New York, and I was like, I need 5 pairs of boots on the ground in Iceland so I can create. So you can send an email that shows up as a text message on people's phones if you can get their email handle over text. And I was trying to make, because I don't want to text people at night, I wanted to make a mass, like, alert message notification group. So I mean, if someone notifies that they're in danger, I can have that trigger a message to such and such, and they'll get a report saying, oh, Abdul is in danger. He is at the bonus supermarket in Leugerdalr, and he needs us to come to where he is because this and this and this is. And I made it so they can select English or Arabic at first and take it in either language and fill out their notes in either language, and then it shows up translated in English on our form. No one volunteered to be on the list to receive the notifications. So at the end of the day, I'm like, I have something set up that they're depending on where, like, hey, if you're in danger, just notify this. Well, it's a bridge to nowhere. No one's on. But I showed this to other people, and they're like, this is actually a very smart idea in ideas where, like, refugees are unsafe and they need to be accounted for and make sure that they know, oh, is so-and-so safe? That with free programs, Google Forms, Google Sheets, I could make something like that. But it was really disheartening when other people couldn't really see the benefit of that vision, and they didn't really. I don't look at that as there's something wrong over there. I look at that as what's missing in who I'm being as a leader, such that this didn't occur for them as an opportunity. They weren't naturally enrolled in, wait, what's going on over here? I want to be a part of this. I do have to be responsible for something was missing in who I was being, that more people didn't want to come be a part of it. So that's where I look for my opportunity for growth and development.
How to connect with people, inspire them, let them see the vision, get them fired up about it, get them engaged, make it happen. And
I mean, for the sake of time, I'll keep it short. But like, there's so much more. Like the next thing I started making a list of is who are all the journalists in Iceland who have been writing about this? Which ones are writing favorably? Which ones are writing unfavorably? And there were some that were writing so favorably. I'm like, you're part of the cause. I'm like, I need this journalist's name, his phone number, his email, his such and such. I'm sure they would love for us to be keeping them abreast of what we're doing. It's free content for them. They can write about it. And I also know, Iceland is small enough that there's no such thing as celebrity there. But I mean, there are enough big influential names from Iceland that if we could get MC Gauti, my favorite Icelandic rapper, if we could get Björk, if we could get Sigur Rós, if we could get all these people to like speak up about this, like we could put a lot of pressure on it. We could even boycott Icelandic tourism, which would be like, oh no, please don't do that. But I saw, it looked to me like anyone else tells me it's impossible. I'm like, oh no, here's how we're gonna take down the Icelandic immigration department and make them stop doing what they're doing. I even tried to come up with a social pressure campaign, which people got really uncomfortable, but I'm like, these are just people we know in Iceland who are showing up and beating these people and deporting them. I'm like, go on Facebook. Who knows this one? Who knows that one? Follow them. Go to the grocery store with them and be like, she is deporting immigrants and blah, blah, blah. Shame, shame. That's not as big a thing in New York. It's like, oh, a shame campaign? Great. We'll hold vigil outside someone's apartment until we shame them into taking action. Icelanders were a bit more like, I can't be a part of this conversation. But you can't tell me something's impossible. You just can't. I mean, here we are today, you know? You can't tell me something's impossible. Because how would you know? How would anyone know?
Yeah, I mean, Henry Ford once said, whether or not you believe you can or you can't, you're right.
You're right. Yep.
So
I had a drag queen in Milwaukee, my hometown, once tell me, after I was part of a group that protested for marriage equality in New York State, and we got it. And I remember I was talking to these queens in Milwaukee trying to pass the torch, and one of them, she's like, oh, we'll never have marriage equality in Wisconsin. And I remember thinking, like, first of all, who do you think you're talking? Like, no. Like, and then secondly, with that attitude,
you're right.
And it just, I can't. When people say it's impossible, I'm like, just say I don't feel well, or just say I don't know. Just say I don't know. That's the more accurate answer.
Yeah, but also, you know, there's this tendency whenever you're trying to do something, you know, you come across people who don't agree with your vision or who don't embrace it or who think it's like pointless. You know, it's like you got to remember you only need a certain number of people to make it happen.
Yeah.
So you just have to keep your focus on working with the willing.
Well, yeah.
And not get hung up on letting them like zap all your energy.
A friend of mine who was very, on a very LGBTQ activist, and a very corporate sort of person as well. He always talks about, I'm not trying to talk to the people on the far right and convince them. He's like, I want to speak to the movable middle.
Right.
And as an animal rights activist, we always talk about the 10% tipping point. I don't need the whole world to go vegan.
Right.
I need 10% of the world to go vegan, because then so will go the way of everything else. Like suddenly, now that there's enough people, it'll start becoming easier. I mean, my God, on the way, on the Uber from the airport to my friend's place at midnight, I did an Uber and I added a stop at Burger King through the drive-thru because I got an Impossible Whopper because I'm like, I haven't eaten all day.
Oh, they have an Impossible Whopper at Burger King?
At Burger King. So you have to tell them no mayo. But when I'm traveling, and vegans are so easily divided on any number of topics. Ask them what they think about Gary Francione, you will divide a room. Ask them what they think about the Impossible Burger, you will divide the room. Ask what they think about Honey LeBronc's the vegan drag queen. Everyone's like, she's all right. I have my haters. But it's whatever you think of the Impossible Burger, the fact that someone who wants to not eat meat can now pull over any truck stop, any side of any road in any city or town. They can go to a Burger King and they can have a vegan burger that tastes exactly like the real thing. So, I mean, like, that we're not 10% vegan yet, and already that is accessible enough. So all we need to do, I had a friend once, my friend Jason, his late husband, also named Jason, dealt with depression and anxiety. In November of 2017, he took his life. And I'm going to visit Jason to keep him company up in Ithaca. And he's talking about how he, used to get it's so sad, but like these Blue Apron, these meal box deliveries, and it was like, dinner for two. And he's like, well, it's now dinner and then lunch for the next day. And I'm like, it's kind of broke my heart, but he's still sticking with this. And he's like, oh yeah, so I make all these things. Like I had this shrimp Alfredo, and I'm so sorry. And I'm like, do not start apologizing to me that you're eating shrimp. If all you can do is put the pieces back together and move on and find some shred of joy in life, I'll make the world around you vegan, and you'll just fall in because you have no choice, So you're right. We don't need. What did you call it? Not the movable middle. But
work with the willing.
Work with the willing.
Yeah.
I love that.
And I got it from somebody one of these like business consulting, motivational speaker things.
Yeah.
So I can't think of her name right now, so I can't take credit for it.
Okay.
Just putting that out there.
Okay.
So I guess did you know that NASA's planning to send astronauts back to the moon again, since for the first time since 1972?
I actually didn't. And I've been wondering ever since why we haven't attempted it. Wait, why haven't we attempted it, and why are we doing it now?
So I think depending upon who you talk to, you get different answers. But I think a lot of it comes to why did we go to the moon the first time, and that was to beat the Russians.
Yeah.
And so
spite can be a great motivator sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if that was like the primary objective, what's kind of amazing is not that we quit after Apollo 17, but that we actually had Apollo 12, which would be the second time that we land people on the moon. It's like victory laps, I guess. This kind of like
this will be 12?
No. So Apollo 11 was the first time that we landed people on the moon back in 1969. And then we did in 12, 13 was supposed to, but then they had an issue on the way to the moon that caused them to have to abort, and they didn't actually land. 14 landed on the moon, 15 landed on the moon, 16 landed on the moon, 17, which happened in 1972.
But people weren't on it.
On which one?
Were people on any of them?
All of them.
Wait, so we did try sending people to the moon since 72?
No, 72 is the last time, and that was Apollo 17.
And that was the first time we landed on the moon?
First time to land on the moon was Apollo 11 in 1969.
Wait, did we land on the moon again since then? Did people set foot on it?
Since 1972? No.
How many times have people landed on the moon?
6 times.
I thought it was just the once.
No. So we landed 1969.
Because I wondered, like, why did we never do it again if we could do it once?
Yep,
Okay.
so we had Apollo 12 that had sent 3 astronauts, 1 stayed in orbit, 2 landed.
Yeah.
Apollo 13, they were supposed to land on the moon, but the command capsule had an explosion on the way there, and they had to do everything to get them back. Apollo 14 landed on the moon, Apollo 15 landed on the moon, 16 landed on the moon, 17 landed on the moon, that's the last time.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
That was a very productive couple of years.
It was.
So why did we stop in 72?
We had the Vietnam War going on. People lost interest in it. It was costing a lot. So I mean, we had issues here.
If
in the
we would
States
spend on discovery what we've spent on war, even a fraction of it, I would imagine.
I know. I mean, whenever you look at NASA's budget, which I think is like $25 billion a year, which is a huge sum, but compared to what the 800 or 900 billion that we spend on military, it's really kind of a small fraction. And then like the $2 or $3 trillion budget that we have, I think it's actually I think it's closer to 4 trillion.
Yeah, imagine if we space exploration is one thing. There's so many ways we could reallocate those funds for things that are much more essential. I mean, I hate to say, but even nowadays we have people in social justice circles talking about why are we bothering with this stuff when we have people right here to feed? And it is a fair point, but it's like it doesn't have to be one or the other. But I guess because we're incinerating all that money on war, it ends up being one or the other.
Well, and you could use that same kind of dichotomy with anything that we do. Why do we have theaters whenever we have starving people? Is a thing. Or why do we have sports stadiums whenever we have starving people? Or why do we have, TVs whenever there's starving people?
Yeah.
It's just like it's funny how people don't really make the same choice. Like why do we have American football whenever we have starving people? Shouldn't we? That type of thing. So it's kind of interesting how people suddenly like, oh, now we're worried about the starving people.
Yeah.
But I think
that is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
selective outrage.
Exactly. It's like, But I mean, how do you feel about that question? Like us going back to the moon, why we still have lots of issues here, unresolved refugees that are being mistreated.
Well, I don't think that there are issues that need to be conflated because it falls into the type of thinking of like, well, there's only so much to go around. Says who? Says the people who are rationing out what there is to go around, right? And also, I know that the powers that be that run this country, they don't actually want everyone clothed and fed and having them, because as long as we keep a poor working class, then you've always got free cheap labor. So I don't have the illusion that like government is going to be the answer to those kind of social problems. In fact, I wish government could get out of the way, because I'm very anti-police. Not everyone's going to take that same view as me, but people always make the argument of like, oh yeah, well then who are you going to call when someone breaks into your house and shoots so-and-so? I'm like, well, first of all, the police already did not stop that from happening. Are you asking who I'm going to invite to come make a report about it? Like, community-based, and I think we saw so much of this in the last few years during the pandemic. If you just leave us to it, the community, we will figure out how to take care of ourselves. Literally every other tribe out there has, right? Every other, when people always talk about like, no, you couldn't have, I dream of a currency-free world. Not just money-free, like not just currency-free, but like a money-free, like that's not a thing. And people, they tell me it's impossible. And I'm like, literally every other species has figured this out, including us at one point. You can't tell me it's impossible. You just, if you're telling me it's impossible, what you're telling me is, I'm not really creative, and I don't like to use my noodle. Like, and you know, I might not be directly answering the question yet, but you know how when people say, like, they're basically saying no by saying, well, how could we possibly do that? You'll notice they're phrasing it like it's a question. They're not asking a question. No. Like, well, how can we possibly do that? You are not asking me, and I love to tell people, you're not asking me a question. Yes, I am. I'm like, no, you're not. You're asserting that we can't.
Right.
Take your same question and honestly inquire, how could we possibly do that? Oh, things start showing up. You'll start, maybe you won't find an answer, but you'll find a whole lot of questions. And then you can inquire into those, and before you know it, maybe you found the answer to that problem, maybe you didn't, maybe you found the answer to 3 other problems along the way.
Absolutely.
There's just, if certainty is a liability. It's such a liability. And I try to check myself for certainty. Anytime I define God as a form of spiritual electricity I can access when I stay out of my own way. Therefore, for me, the work spiritually is about, well, where am I in my way? And okay, get out of, sometimes, oh, I'm in my way because I need to just breathe. Okay, breathe. Okay, I've cleared the path, right? And people always say, like, God and science are, we were saying this before we started filming, that God and science are like two opposites. This is God, and the more we figure this stuff out, the more God's like, yes, that's how I did that. Okay, did you figure out how I did that? Did you figure out what these are yet? And I think God is delighted when we reveal God's secrets, right? And you know, at the end of the day, do I think of God, I feel of God as a form of electricity. Do I think of God as some old guy with a beard sitting up in the sky on a cloud? Well, yes, actually, of course I do. Because I can't conceive of talking to a form of electricity. I can think of talking to some guy with a beard. So I still use a cartoon God as like the mouthpiece for who I'm praying to and directing my thoughts towards. Right. But when people are like, oh, that's blasphemy, I'm like, God can handle it. God can handle it. Where was I going with that? Creative thinking, it's the illusion that there's not enough. This is, okay, I'm going to say another thing that's going to sound silly, but oh well. And it's not unrelated because I got this from watching a space video one day. It's a feeling I had politically after, there was this one video I was watching that was like, from now until the end of time. And it was showing Earth. Not just like as a ball, but like going through Earth and showing you different things. And it was like, okay, this is, you know, every second time will speed up 10 times or something. And so every second of the video, the rate is getting faster and faster. It was like a 30-minute long video. You watch it, okay, now the seas are boiled over, now the world is, now the sun has blown up and blah, blah, blah. And the more I watched this video, the more I realized, wait, life on this planet was only possible in this spot of time. It couldn't have happened in the same place during this time or that time. It was only at this time and only at this place in the entire universe. And I think I was born at this specific time, at this specific place in the universe, and I was born into rules and agreements and understandings and laws that I never consented to being governed. And I know people like my dad will argue, like, oh yeah, well then, what roads are you going to drive on? And I'm like, the roads that I have been forced to count on because I didn't have the option, right? Like, when people are like, oh yeah, well you need housing and you need this and you need that. Who's going to, well, I've been made to need those things. I don't have the option, right? It infuriates me that I was given a chance somewhere in all of this, but somehow Nancy Pelosi gets a say in the matter about whether I can get married or not. Like, I don't accept that. So I'm not sure if what the question was that I was answering, but my answer to the question I remember being something along the lines of, you can't convince me that there's not enough for everyone. If you tell me that there's not enough for everyone, I'm like, well then someone who's not very creative is running things. Let artists take over. Let someone who has the power to conceive of something better take over and make something new. I don't know how we'll do that, but I would never say it's impossible just because I don't know how.
As you were talking, I was reminded of a Mark Twain quote. It goes, it's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you're absolutely sure of that just ain't so.
That's certainty is a liability.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was saying about the God thing. That's my definition of God. However, I'm not married to it. I'm aware that the day I decide to cement that is what God is, then that's the day I won't be open to any nudges or changes. So it still works for me. I haven't found it necessary to change it, but I'm willing to let that shift and change because why shouldn't it? You know?
Right. No, that's absolutely. You always should be growing. You know, the moment you don't. But at the same token, you also need like identity and things to keep you stable, and things to hold on to whenever you have other things changing. So it's difficult to be both flexible and also maintain some anchoring. It's like those two things are in contrast.
I'm trying to imagine examples of how I have that in my life. I'm at a loss for that. Can you give me an example of how you remain flexible while staying anchored?
I'm struggling with it myself, so I have no idea.
I would say routine, but when I'm visiting from New York, I'm here in Houston, I forgot my water bottle. So I'm getting dehydrated. I get dehydrated when I leave New York because in New York, you always have something, you're always carrying your belongings with you. And when I'm just going room to room, I will forget to drink water. So there's, even my routines, I think those can get upended by my flexibility. But I try to think, I love the idea of routines, but as a person with ADHD, it's really hard to stick to them. But I'm anchored in my values. That's where I drop anchor. My anchor is in compassion and nonviolence, and even then sometimes I fail in that regard. Sometimes I'm not terribly compassionate, but I'm anchored in the belief that the end game to this game is everyone wins. Everyone wins or no one won. That's the goal. And I'm so disinterested in anything other than that because it would just be incomplete.
Did you see that game we were playing the other day, Heave Hove?
Is that what it's called? The swinging?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I mean that's a game where either everybody wins or nobody does.
No one wins unless everyone wins. Yeah, exactly.
Like that. When you think about the future of humanity, like 200 years out, I suppose maybe ask two similar questions. One is, what does it look like to you given the current trends? And then two, what would you like it to be?
I mean, given the current trends, I find myself wondering if there will be a future for humanity. I gave a speech once at College of Charleston. It's not like University of Charleston. It's a different name, like Charleston College or College of Charleston. And they asked me, as the vegan drag queen, to give a speech on environmentalism, veganism, but we're going to talk about. And I started by asking, this is a younger generation, and I started by asking them, like, how many of you have a palpable fear of we might not have a planet because of global warming. And enough hands went up. And it doesn't seem to make, it's not making the difference. The fact that enough of us are afraid of it, the fact that enough of us know it might not happen. So I do fear whether we will do enough in time to turn things around. For the planet will be, there is no save the planet. The planet will be fine with or without us, you know? Right. It's not save the planet, it's save our habitat. My idea for him, ask me the question again because I want to hear it in another way.
Oh, okay. Given the current trend, you know, if you were just to play the tape forward as things have been unfolding under time or what have you, where do you think we are in 200 years? And then as a parallel sort of thought exercise, where would you like to see us be?
Okay, so the first thought is, where do I see us in 200 years from now because of these? If things continue the way they are, if I believe science, we're not going to be here if things continue as they have been. So I guess that's that. And then that becomes a very selfish end game of like, well, will I be okay? Will I make it through? Will my nieces and nephews, well, maybe their grandkids? It's just such a sad game when I think of it that way. But what would I like to see for humanity in 200 years? You know what? Every country, every land mass has their indigenous people. And that's just such a, it all started with colonialism, right? And it's not just when like European colonialism started, but we can look back however many thousands of years. When I was in history class, I was always surprised by one thing. I get why you're gonna conquer the town and kill whoever and take over the castles and take over the land. But I'm shocked by the one other thing that always happened that I'm like, why do they do that though? Is then they torch the libraries. And I'm like, you're throwing away information. There's all that. They want to destroy that information. They want to destroy those ideas, those ideologies, that any evidence of that culture having existed. And it just pains me when I think, what was the national park? Things if you don't question growing up, you would think like, oh, the national parks are what? A lot of the national parks are land that was seized from indigenous people. And one of them, I don't know if it was Yellowstone or whatever, people watching this will probably Google it or know which one it was, but I remember hearing about how we took over this land to make it like a park, and like, oh, we're gonna preserve this wild. The people that used to live on that land, they knew to burn certain trees and when to clear the way for such, they knew how to live in harmony with that ecosystem, that they maintained it in a way that we just messed up. We're like, wait, we're doing all the right things. Why is it killing the land? And it's like, oh, we'll call in the people who know better and ask them. So when I think of the future, if you're asking what would I like to see, I would like to see no nations, no borders. I would like to see no currency. I would like to see no money. I'm sure I just got people's backs up just here. Well, how is that possible? I don't know. Let's figure that. Why don't we become interested in figuring that out? What would that save? You know, that's what I would like to see. And I don't want to put too many designs on it because I feel like if we all had our basic human needs met, we'd all be free to go our separate ways and fulfill whatever happiness and joy looks like to us. For some people, maybe that doesn't involve looking outwards into the stars. Maybe for some, it's more about digging and excavating. Maybe for some of them, it's just about being, you know? That's what I would like to see. And not to make this about government or politics, but I don't mean like down with government, no government, but like, how about government? How about we govern ourselves? And this is where I'm fascinated with blockchain technology, because let's look at every time when we vote, all of this stuff that's like, oh, we're going to recount, or this was rigged, or this. With blockchain, we could have global consensus almost instantaneously. Maybe not instant, 12-hour window given some people are asleep at certain times, but like imagine the ability to query the entire population of this planet and be like, hey, how do we feel about this situation? It's like, oh, well, we feel this way. I don't care what special interests say. I don't care what small government, big government says. This is the way the people are going because this is the way forward that we all feel, right? And so as far as technology and society in the future, I think we could so beautifully write a new constitution, maybe not for our country, but like for humanity, you know? I don't know, some hippie version of that. That's sort of my idea for the future. Oh, but also, I have a Amazon Echo at home. I got the iPhone, so now I have Siri. I do have one Google Nest at home. I really hate that, like, oh, well, I can do this, but I can't do this on this. And I have an Apple, but now that means I can't use this program because that was only Android. I wish these companies to get out of our way, because imagine the future we could be having right now if it wasn't for everyone trying to compete with proprietary. Imagine if everything that was just discovered was just always for all. And sure, there's some stuff that, well, this information doesn't belong in the hands of just anyone because it needs to be, fine. But like, damn it, the movies promised me we would have hovering skateboards by now, and we just don't. You know, and we could have electric vehicles. We could have clean energy. And we don't. And why? Because it's not possible? No, because there are people standing in the way of that. And I'm like, you don't even know me and you don't want me to have that? Like, get out of the way. That's... I can't imagine having that much power and that being what I want for the world is for someone to not have that. It could be utopia. It really could be heaven here on earth. It really, really could be. And aren't there sometimes moments that are like heaven on earth? Like, we know it's possible. It's already here with us. There's just obstacles, and sure, life is obstacles, fine. But there's so many obstacles that just don't need to be there. That's where I see us in 200 years. That's where I want to see us in 200 years.
I think it's interesting to say a world without currency or money. You know, oftentimes I hear people say they can't do such and such because they don't have money, or, you know, nobody's funding this or doing that. And, you know, at the end of the day, money doesn't actually do anything for you. Right? I mean, you need people with a certain set of skills. You need access to certain resources.
Yeah.
You could have money and still not have that.
Yeah.
And you also could find an engaged set of people that are willing to do it without, quote unquote, being paid.
Yeah.
And you can still make it happen. So it's like, you know, it's
a catalyst. It's a motivator to make something happen. But if you didn't have money there and you could find another way to motivate people to do it, well, then we could do it.
And, you know, people are motivated all the time.
The moon doesn't care whether we spent dollars to get there or not. It's there to be discovered one way or another, you know?
But I mean, even like having like a sporting event, you know, you're not paying the audience to be there. The audience is actually paying to be there themselves, or, you know, some type of, you know, party or something. I mean, it's like, money doesn't necessarily motivate people, and without money, people aren't necessarily demotivated either. It's like,
right. I'm not a very money motivated person. I'm motivated by possibility and ideas. That's what excites me. If you tell me like, hey, you know what we could do, and I'm like, oh my God, we could do that. How would we do? Oh, we could do this and this and this. That's what motivates me.
Right.
And I think people have lost touch with that as a motivation. And I just think the world would be so much more interesting if we weren't I don't remember, you know how you watch something 10, 20 years ago and then you forget, and then you're like, am I sure I watched that or did I imagine it? There was some scientist and he invented something called the Arco Santi. I don't know where it was, at New Mexico or somewhere probably in the Southwest. And it was like almost like it was like concrete. It was this big like dome, almost like a quarter of a sphere. And inside of it was like a complete civilization. And they actually built one. And because of the shape of it, it like trapped hot air in the winter, but deflected heat in the summer just because of its shape. And it was designed that people could live there, people could work there. Then this same guy is talking about what the homes would look like. And none of this was with imaginary technology. It was all like, well, here's how you could do it technologically. He was like, you would have a phone in your home, but you wouldn't have a physical phone on you. It would know where you are, and it would beam the sound waves to you so that you just have, and then he talked about cars, how there's certain metals that you can form at certain temperatures. And so if you forge the metal at this temperature in this shape, if you get in a car crash and you dent in the front of your car, all you do is heat it back to that temperature, it goes back to that shape. And I watched this must have been 20 years ago. And so I was like, oh, well, in 20 years' time, we have none of it. And it's just like, why? There's all this stuff that we could have. And I don't understand why we don't have it, you know? And that's what motivates me. And if someone, and then I remember he was talking about, we could have a society where only maybe like 5 people needed to work. And it's like, well, people do. We've all learned from the pandemic. I learned, you know what? Having 2 weeks to do nothing sounds wonderful. 2 weeks and 1 day of nothing is like, please give me something to do. Can I volunteer? Can I do? There's no such thing as lazy. There's no such thing as someone being lazy. There can be lacking motivation, or there can be the idea that, well, you should be motivated by that. Well, but that's not what motivates me. And if our basic needs were all met, we would all just be free to be like, hey, how can I help? You know? Everyone loves helping. And we only have a problem letting ourselves being contributed to, you know, that's the hard part. But I would like to, here's what I would like to imagine. If we can't abandon currency, you know how in certain video games you can only get a certain number of points? Like, I have 999,999 points. I can still keep shooting, you know, spacecrafts, but I can't have any more points. I believe there should be a wealth cap. And I don't know what it should be, but let's just say, how about $50 million is the most anyone should be able to have? Because no one needs to have more than that, right? And the only, or maybe like 9,999,999. And I also think there should also be a certain amount you can earn per year. And that's all. That's all you can earn per year. And let's say you already have $10 million. Well, then why would you, like, you can't go out and earn more money. So then the question becomes, well, then how would you motivate people to do the dirty work and the jobs? Well, those people would be given extra privileges. Those things would have other rewards and incentives in turn for it. If there is free housing, and I love it, people like my mom and dad, like, why would there be free housing? Why should I have to pay for my house when someone just gets free shelter? Because you don't want the house that they're going to be given to live in. You want more for yourself. That's why you're working harder, you know? You can't steal the land from me and then tell me I have to work for shelter. That just doesn't work. Then you're not a responsible land stealer if you aren't shepherding all of the people who live here. But yeah, I think, if not a currency-free world, I would love to see a limit to how much someone can earn per year, a limit to how much someone can have, and that would be very possible with blockchain. And if you want to continue working, fine, you would just get other benefits. You know, it would be like, all right, well, you can pick from a nicer house so long as you do this and this and this and this. But it would all be above and beyond. It wouldn't be like, well, you get food if you do. Everyone would have enough. And I mean, I don't think doctors would want to stop doctoring, you know, because it's a sense of obligation, responsibility, and duty. That's what drives them. And I just know if money and time were not issues for me, I would just be building things and creating things and giving things to. I always my nickname for myself has always been Prometheus. Like, I just want to find fire and give it to people.
Didn't turn out too well for Prometheus though, with the
I guess
river
not.
and the birds and stuff.
I forget how it ended. I don't want to know how it ended. Don't spoil it for me.
So I don't know if you've ever been to a kids soccer game, and you know, at least around here at the end, it's very common for like the parents line up in like this little tunnel formation. The kids like run through it, you know, and it just seems like kind of like the goofiest things. Kids love it though, but I'm like, you know, like there's a certain amount of expectations that have been created around it that it's like never going away. You know, like all you need is like 2 parents or, you know, a kid to say tunnel, and then everybody's forced to like be in it.
Yeah.
And you know, the same thing is true of a lot of the things that you're talking about, like changing here in society on Earth. There's just too many interlocking things that it's really hard to make any substantive changes to sort of like the way the system is like built. But I think like whenever you start creating like colonies on Mars and the moon and other places, that you'll be, you know, everybody will know everybody. Yeah, there'll be a certain kind of, people will go there with certain expectations. You know, you mentioned here, you're like born into a society where people have already put restrictions and stuff on you. The initial colonists to Mars would be people who chose to be there. So they would have actually accepted sort of that situation,
Yeah.
and hopefully they're like engaged in forming it and what have you. Their children's a whole other story. So
Yeah,
it's
that's a whole other question.
It's a temporary window right there, but there is a window right there where you got this group of humans who've gone to this place, and they sort of get to recreate the way that they live.
Yeah.
And without any type of pre-existing, I mean, the baggage they took with them, of course, you know, and the psychological baggage and sort of the blinders and stuff. But you almost, in addition to being like on a different planet, they almost get to sort of recreate society. And I was just wondering how you think about that.
I mean, I have anxiety around that because I'm already thinking like, well, who would be choosing this? I remember I used to think, I remember my dad once told me, like, no, you couldn't, you know, destroy the Constitution and rewrite. You don't understand, Ben. It's a perfect document. I'm like, why are there amendments? If it was a perfect document, why did it need to be amended? If I had a kitchen table and I amended it, and then I amended it again, and then I amended it again, after the 30th time, I'm like, you know what I need is not more duct tape. I need a new table. And when people say it can't be done, I'm like, Iceland did it. They protested, their entire government stepped down, and they put a new government in place. A lot of the same stuff still happened, but they wrote a new constitution. You can't tell me it can't be done. But I've always thought, like, what if we took our most intelligent minds? But then once someone told me, they're like, well, so-and-so is really intelligent, and politically he's really blah, 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 like not great. Mm-hmm. And so that's not always the best bar for the most intelligent people, but I don't know. It's kind of like the movie Contact, and like why we're choosing who we're choosing to send to meet the aliens.
Sure.
I don't know who, but I just pray that it's like Dixie Carter said in Designing Woman. I pray that something about I pray that people will get good sense, and I pray that people with good sense, or the people in power, will have good sense, and I pray that people who have good sense will come to power, and that the rest of us will be blessed with the tolerance and the patience to stand you in the meantime, something like that. But it's I just really hope that it's the right people. I hope that it's people who are going there with the game of everyone wins, even the planet, even the environment, even 7 generations from this moment, everyone will have what they need, and we can start over. Mm-hmm. I don't want to wax cynical and say like, but I find that rare, because that sounds really cool. It's easy to sound cool and smart when you take the negative view. I do believe in humanity. I do believe that I don't believe there's any such thing as a bad person. That idea makes no sense to me. I'm like, what would how about we just like, oh, in the baby delivery department, like, nope, this is a bad one.
Yeah.
Then let's develop a test for that.
Hopefully not a sniff check.
Yeah. You know what? Dogs will know. This is a good one. But I mean, like, there's no such thing as a bad person, because like, cut me open, show me where the bad person gene is. Right? You're not going to find it. There's bad motivators, right? But I do believe we all have that in us. I do, and I'm sure I'm thinking of like crooked Wall Street types out there who are like, no, I'm not interested in everyone winning. But I really think if you got people to look at what's beneath that, you could really get everyone enrolled in the idea of everyone can win. And I don't know what's blocking us. I don't know what's in everyone. It's like different for everyone, right? I saw what there was for me that was in my way of wanting everyone to win. But I really hope that the people who are going there, they're going there so everyone can win. I pray that.
If you could, would you take a trip to space?
It depends on who's manning the vehicle. Is it operated by a PlayStation controller? Then no. I would love to. I've always wanted to. Yeah.
But a Nintendo controller? No, just kidding.
Not that. Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, would you feel like SpaceX is sending people to the International Space Station? A couple of years ago, they sent 4 people around the Earth for 3 days, and they landed back. And they routinely send people for NASA to the International Space Station and back. Would you feel comfortable taking such a trip?
10,000%.
Okay.
I think anyone's reason for saying no would most likely be because, like, well, what if something goes wrong? Well, then I died getting to see the planet a certain way or whatever. It's one of those things that even though there's the risk of accident or whatever, I might sneeze. That kind of a risk is worth it. Like I went skydiving in 2019 in Key West, and I remember like going, oh, this is kind of expensive. And they're like, do you want us to film it? I'm like, yeah. They're like, well, that's $100 extra. I'm like, and then I realized, I'm like, oh, my annual skydiving budget is actually just this one time now ever. This isn't something that's going to factor into my overall expense. Just splurge the one time. Do it right. Do it big. That's kind of how I would feel about that. If I had that opportunity, I would hate to turn it down, because why wouldn't I want for the rest of my life to be able to say, you should have seen it, I can't even describe it. Imagine what that must be like.
Were you afraid to jump out of the plane?
I was only afraid, my body was afraid in the moment that falling began to happen, because my body's there to tell me danger, right?
Sure.
But I remembered thinking, I'm like, well, this guy's told me that I asked him how many times he's done it, and he's like, I stopped counting after 5,000. That's good enough. And that wasn't recently, that was a long time ago. So I'm like, this guy's not dead. I'm not special enough to be the one guy that he goes splat with. So I'm probably going to be fine. Okay, well, he said, do this, sit like this, have my arm like this, forward, back, and then forward we go. And I just thought, all I have to do is, like, when he asked afterwards, like, how did that feel? And I'm like, kind of good, because I didn't have to be in charge. I just let go, and just, I could just be a guest, So, having faith in that this is safe and whatever. That's why with the whole Ocean Gate thing, I'm like, did they at least ever test it once? Have they sent like a test crash dummy down there? Or knowing that it's been attempted before safely, I felt a lot safer doing it. Yeah.
It sounds
It's so peaceful. I don't think people would think of skydiving as peaceful, but it's just kind of nothingness and pause and stillness and just space. It doesn't feel like falling. It just feels like floating. It was really incredible. I would love to do it again.
Do you think you'll get an opportunity to travel in space in your lifetime?
I am 44. I've always joked that I plan to be at least 133 years old, because in music class in 1990, our teacher, Mrs. Semin, she said, 1991, it's a palindrome year, and she said, you're one of the only generations that will ever live to see 2 palindrome years. And I remember thinking, are you telling me I'm going to die before 2112? And I was like, I don't know, 11 at the time, and I'm like, you don't know me like that. And then I started doing the math. I'm like, how old would I have to live to be 2112? I would need to be 133 years old. So I've just decided long ago, I'm going to live to be 135.
Okay.
I used to tell people this joke. I'm like, I know 2 things for certain about my life. One, I'm going to die very young. It's going to be so sad. When I die, people are going to say, it's so tragic, he was so young, he had his whole life ahead of him. And they're like, no, don't say that. I'm like, and 2, I'm going to live to be at least 135 years old.
Excellent.
You get it.
Yeah.
But given that, do I think I'll have an opportunity? Yeah. I mean, there's things I didn't think I would have had an opportunity to do my whole life, and they're possible now. So why not?
That's awesome.
And I would love to. And if you're offering I consent. The answer is yes. Take me.
I think the most memorable answer to that question was yes, even if I had to get abducted by aliens to do it.
I used to think that way. Like, if there's aliens, why do they abduct me? I think I'm too absorbed. I was getting ready for a show once. I was putting my makeup on at a friend's house. It was their adjacent neighbor's house upstairs, and that neighbor, they were talking about how their house is haunted. And I was like, all right, here we're gonna go. We're gonna see. And then I realized, like, if I was some haunted spirit stuck in the afterlife, and I was looking for someone to come and cry to, it wouldn't be the dragon who's like, hang on, can you go in my purse? Go in my car, get my purse. I need the thing that's in the thing inside the red box. Okay, anyway, you, don't let me forget, blah, blah, blah. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Hey, could you hand me that? I would be like, I'm not talking to that person. So I think that's probably why ghosts and probably aliens wouldn't bother with me. So like, he can't see past himself. Just move on to a more neutral person. But yeah, that's a good answer. If aliens had to abduct me, I used to think I'm like, what? I'm here, take me. And now, like, you get to a certain age, you're like, ugh, get off me.
I went to this thing where an astronaut was talking. There's a whole bunch of kids in the crowd, and one of them, hey, do you believe in aliens? And he's like, nothing against Roswell, Mexico. I've been there several times. It's a nice place, but from space, the most beautiful place is the Caribbean. So until I start seeing alien sightings in the Caribbean, I'm gonna just,
yeah.
wait.
And also, I mean, like, what do we define as an alien? I mean, like, they're here among us. If you look at all of the species that we've yet to discover, like, I'm fascinated by the idea of what's out there, but I do think sometimes we look out there while ignoring what else is here. I'm sure we've discovered a great big chunk of this planet, but I doubt we've scratched the surface, It does always, I have to say about space exploration, I'm always so fascinated. Like, Galileo noticed that the planets weren't, I'm like, how do you know? You didn't have internet, you didn't have Stein Optical, you didn't have how did they know this back then? And it's one of the things where I'm always so upset when I hear that they torch libraries. I'm an avid non-reader myself.
Oh.
But it's just ADD. If the words aren't on a screen and moving and being narrated and whatever, it's not enough to me to pay attention. But how are we standing on the shoulders of all of this knowledge? And like, starting from here, what's possible? It excites me to no end. So, yeah. I've also had a friend say that we're not the first human civilization that's been on this earth, and there's been other societies long before us, like long before Homo sapiens, basically. And they've had their own technologies, and I've heard all of that stuff. I don't know what to make of that, but like, I wouldn't doubt it. Like, who's to say it couldn't have happened,
Sure. No, we need to be careful of what we think we know.
Especially if there's like, we went to this dinosaur exhibit yesterday, and it's like, well, this period was from 100 million BC to 90 million BC. Well, there's 10 million years that happened. How do we know that there wasn't maybe like 800 years where there were some primates, right?
Sure.
How do we know? In all of that span of time, like, there might have been if we've only scratched the surface of now, the late 1900s, early 2000s, what surfaces went completely unscratched and undocumented, right? Who knows? Who knows what's happened here before us?
Well, I like to say that my target audience for this hasn't even been born yet. So I kind of see this as somebody 100 years, 200 years looking back to now.
Please go vegan. It is literally the only option at this point to save the planet from global warming.
What about artificial milk?
I'm fascinated by that. As long as an animal is not involved in the process, because the baseline definition for vegan, when people get confused about like, well, how do I know if something's vegan? Consent. Was there consent? Was everyone consenting to this process, right? So by that nature, how about honey from bees? What would your guess be? Is that vegan or not?
It would be no.
Right.
Okay.
Because the bees aren't making it for us.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, but you have to humanely do it. I'm like, they're not making it for us. It's not, and it's such a human idea to be like, oh, this resource is mine to take. And it's like, says who? Says the bees probably wouldn't agree to that. But what was the question?
Just the observation that this is for future generations to look back on now.
Yeah.
And see what I think.
What did I think about artificial milk? Yes.
Oh, that was the question.
I do think that kind of pioneering technology is incredible. And I did have it was called animal free, or it was called not milk, and it has milk protein in it. Now, I probably wouldn't want to drink that just because I don't believe it's good. It's not, milk protein is not good for a human body. It's excellent for a baby cow. So I wouldn't want to drink that, not because I'm allergic, but just because I'm like, I don't think my body is grateful for that sort of a fuel source. My body probably knows exactly what to do with oats and almonds, but it's probably like, what is this fake lactose stuff? What's the real lactose stuff? The body's like, no, thank you. But I think it's wonderful that we're in that inquiry of how could we make this another way. Even before I was vegan, I was fascinated by like, this is vegan cheese or vegan meat? I want to try, how could you make that another way? And I wasn't thinking of the animal or the animal's feelings. I was too conditioned to ignore that compassion that we're all grown up with. But yeah, I think it's fascinating.
That's awesome.
It's not an endorsement of any and all forms of that, because I know that right now with like cellular regeneration to make meat, there's I thought I was all for that, and then I'm hearing like it still requires that like hundreds or even thousands of cows are harvested a year and blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, if we have companion animals in our homes, like cats who are obligate carnivores, dogs not so much. Cats are obligate carnivores. It's kind of a necessary evil. We have to buy meat for them, but it's like, well, if we can have cellular lab-grown meat for cats, then it's I don't know. There's always ethical questions to be asked, but I'm happy to see progress in all of its forms.
Well, Ben, I know we talked about a whole wide range of subjects. Is there anything else you would like to discuss that we didn't get to?
I feel like I would be remiss not to use any opportunity to say why I think it's important that people think about animal rights and veganism. I went vegan for my health. This is a great reason to go vegan. It's not a great motivator to stay vegan, because if I'm going vegan for my health, well, like, one steak isn't gonna hurt. It will hurt the cow. But when I read a book called The Face on Your Plate, and it sounds like a gross, it was the saddest thing I ever read. And there was an example where this woman who used to be a pig farmer was talking about how these pigs that she raised from babies, they only ever knew her as mom. And so one day when this like truck shows up and it lowers a ramp and they're terrified, and they're one of the most intelligent animals. I think they're the third most intelligent animal. They can smell the blood and the fear. I took part in Toronto with the Toronto Pig Save. There's the Toronto Chicken Save, the Toronto Cow Save. It's a movement where basically we're not really saving them. We go outside of slaughterhouses, we stop the trucks, we ask them for 2 minutes. And these pigs have been on there, if it's the winter, then they've been on there in the freezing Canadian cold for 2-3 days with no food and no water. If it's the summer, they're left in this metal truck for 2-3 days, crammed in with no food and water. You look in there, they're foaming at the mouth, they're dying of thirst, they're terrible. And pigs specifically, you can recognize facial expressions in them, and you're not imagining them. If you look a pig in the eye, you know what they're thinking and feeling. And we stop the truck for just 2 minutes to give these, I'll get emotional thinking about it, but to give these pigs just water. And like, if you've never experienced giving water to a pig that's on a transport truck going into the slaughterhouse, I've never experienced that kind of thirst before. And I remember just wanting so much to say, like, it's okay. And then I just realized it is not going to be okay. It's going to get so much worse than even everything you've just endured. And I had been vegan at that point, maybe 10, 11 years. And it was so crushing to think in that moment, everything I've done for animal rights in the last decade, none of it made a single difference to this pig. And so I went vegan because what we're doing to them, we're looking for life out. Well, we have it right here, and look what we're doing to it. We're not ready to encounter other life forms until we know how to respect other life forms. We're not obligate carnivores. Google comparative anatomy of a carnivore, herbivore, frugivore, or I think it's frugivore. You will see anatomically we're not designed to eat meat. And there are if you're designed to eat meat, you have claws, not nails. If you're designed to eat meat, you have spaces between your teeth and fangs, not little blunt teeth. If you're designed to eat meat, you have a smooth, short intestinal tract, not a ridged, rippled, complicated, long one. Ours is designed to break down and ferment plant matter to get everything out of it. So we have no need to eat animals. And so when you can get your head around the idea that what we're doing to them is completely, and if you can stomach it, there's a film called Dominion. It's a documentary. You can watch it online. I think dominion.com. It is not easy to watch. It is very violent and graphic and triggering. But as Gretchen Weiler, host of the Genesis Awards, it's like the awards but for animal rights, once said, we must not refuse with our eyes what they must endure with their bodies. And so as hard as it was to watch, I thought, we're sentencing them to this. I've taken part in this. The least I can do is watch what I've been insisting on, what I've been paying for. And when I saw what's happening, I just thought, not in my name. If it's going to continue happening, it will not be because of me. And when I think about it, I'm like, it's not consistent with who I know myself to be as a person. That's not who I am. It's not who I would be if given a choice. Well, now I have the choice. And one of the things I was surprised to learn is that animal agriculture, it is the #1 contributing factor to global warming, more than all modes of transportation combined. Actually, I found in Toronto, that's not true. It's not true. It's the second most contributing factor to greenhouse, to global warming. The #1 is food scraps. And I'm like, what do you mean food scraps? They're biodegradable. She's like, my friend, she dumpster dives to save food from going into landfill, not to save money, but she's like, when food goes into landfill, it will never touch oxygen, so it can't compost, it can't break down. Instead, it just turns to methane. So, and I still do it. I'm not composting yet. I still throw food scraps in the garbage and put them in a plastic bag. I know I need to do better. But food waste is the biggest contributor. Animal agriculture is the second biggest contributor. And when you think it takes 14 pounds of grain to yield 1 pound of animal flesh for consumption. So you could feed 14 times more people on a plant-based diet if we stopped raising animals, breeding animals into existence, and feeding all of our resources to them just to get animal foods for the wealthy who can afford them. The only way to feed the planet is on a vegan diet. The only way to a vegan planet is if we stop harvesting animals. The only way to ensure that we have a planet to live on is if we stop animal agriculture. And at the end of the day, not that I wish it on anyone, but I recognize that it's very poetic justice, that what we're doing to them is ultimately going to be our own undoing. COVID, you look, it's just yet another coronavirus. When have we seen coronaviruses? Swine flu, bird flu, mad cow disease. Well, what do these things all have in common? Animal agriculture. You pack that many animals together in a confined space under unfathomably stressful circumstances, and lace their food with 80% of the antibiotics is sold, marketed in the world. 80% of them are not for sick humans, they're for livestock. So that we can keep them from getting sick before we get them to market weight. We are lacing animal flesh and fluids with antibiotics. Why do we think that we are creating the perfect environment for opportunistic infections to mutate and then jump from one species to the next? the undocumented migrant workers who have no rights and they're forced to endure these horrible conditions, then they're sick and stressed. And now the thing that couldn't infect a human can, because it found a way in, because this one guy was really sick and really stressed. And that's how COVID will happen again. As long as we keep eating animals, things like, and earlier I think we were talking at the table with someone else who was saying something about your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins.
Sure.
And when people want to talk about it's my choice, well, if it's not your choice, if there's an unwilling participant, it's not a choice. It's an act you're committing. But at the end of the day, I'm like, you guys, it wasn't enough when I said it was better for your health. It wasn't enough when I said it was better for the environment. Can you please not cause me to have to stay home for 3 years and not see my family again? Because if we keep eating animals, this is going to continue. And we're going to see a increase. Also, lastly, see my friend Priyamva Naik, she's a pulmonologist in Atlanta. She's in a documentary called, I forget the name of it. I think it's called The End of Medicine. And I thought, oh, cool, the end of medicine. What's after medicine? What's the next frontier? No, what we mean by the end of medicine is antibiotics are only going to take us so much further into the future before they will stop working. And if you ask doctors about this, there are doctors in the documentary who say, I actually lose sleep at nights thinking about this because it's a problem we will not be able to handle. And it's going to continue being a problem if we continue eating. The continued use of animals will require the continued use of developing new antibiotics, which will only lead to more and more resistant mutating strains. So this is another one of the reasons why when you ask me, a vegan, about humanity, our future, I'm like, it's going to take so much turning this ship around if we're going to have one. And at the end of the day, I'm not missing any meals. You name anything that you eat or miss or think you would miss giving up, I still eat it. There's vegan versions of everything. I mean, I made mac and cheese and nachos for my friends the other night for dinner, all plant-based. At the end of the day, the thing that we have to do to save ourselves is exercise our compassion. I mean, we should be so lucky that that's the answer, that that's our way forward. It's right in front of us, but everyone's just gonna come up with all of the reasons why, no, I can't. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm born to a famous dairy celebrity, and my dad is in the food business, like fancy restaurant, steakhouse, blah, blah. If I can do it, anyone can do it. So yeah, it's like an imperative that we all stop eating animals at this point, and it's ridiculously easy to do. If I could do it in 2009, anyone can do it in 2023.
It's definitely a lot easier today.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so
really
much for
appreciate
having me.
it.
I really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
I'm sure this is going to be your longest interview that you've ever done.
Well, it's definitely in the longer ones.